I am proud to be talking to Mr. Jon Koenz now, Vice President of Euralarm, Chair of the Service Section of the organization. Sir, for the past 9 months, as humanity, we have been through one of the major crises, uh, and as pundits say, things will not be the same for a couple of years. The pandemic has brought forth some major changes in the way in which we work and live. How the pandemic changed the priorities of Euralar?
The means of communications have massively changed. We had to convert all of our face-to-face meetings to remote events, also spend a lot of energy to improve our website to provide much more content. Now, the reason that I state our priorities haven't changed is most of what we do is tied to both advocating a single European market and driving standards. These are mid to long-term actions. We're talking about the type of focus areas that we have is fast and flexible standardization, or seizing the opportunities of digitalization. And within that, we're talking about areas such as voluntary certification, cyber. All of those wouldn't be affected short term. Another focus area that we have is a Europe-wide approach to testing and certification, or innovation through research. And again, if I take a look at those, we're not affected in that sense by the pandemic. So directly we're not touched. Of course, our members are to different degrees depending on the countries.
Euralarm is a major European organization. Who are its members? How does it work? What is its structure?
Sure. Well, let me start with the first part of your question. Now, our members, we categorize on industrial customers, companies such as Bosch, Honeywell, Securitas, or Siemens. We've got a lot of other smaller industrial customers as well. Then we've got security service providers such as G4S or Verisure. They're new to our organization, but I think important in driving the changes that we see in the market. Then a large part of our members is made up of national fire and security associations. The examples of that would be in the UK, BSIA or FIA, and obviously in Romania we're talking about ARTS. Then we have associate members that we wanted to make sure that we could also have as members, such as certification bodies, such as testing houses or research institutes. So that's regarding our members. Now, how we work and how we're structured. Let me start on how we're structured, because it makes more sense to explain it that way. So we're made up of 4 sections. A security section, a fire section, a extinguishing section, and a services section. Under each one of those sections, we have section meetings once per quarter. Usually we have meetings, WebEx meetings, where we go into specific details on a subject that would be in between. So we'd have any place from 8 to 10 meetings, either face-to-face or via WebEx. Underneath that, each one of the sections is able to and has the responsibility to put together task groups. A task group takes just that. It takes one sub-segment of a section theme. So, and they would work independently of the fire section meetings, and they would work on a specific task and defining it further and going back to the section and reporting on it. There are some task groups that are horizontal, meaning that they'll touch each one of the sections, such as remote services, such as cybersecurity. Such themes are being handled in a horizontal task group. Then we have committees such as advocacy to see how do we position ourselves, how do we address the advocacy themes. Then we have one on marketing, and that is how do we support, how do we present to the market the different themes that we have. Also the white papers that we work on. So they define, together with the sections, both of those, how do we get to the European, different players within the European market. Then we have horizontal compliance, which talks just about that, themes that are horizontal, but that may not be in a task group. And then obviously we have a finance committee. To manage all of that, we've got a general director, we've got technical managers, and there we've invested in the last year. We initially had one technical manager, but with the growth of the sections, because the extinguishing section is the newest, which we opened up a year and a half ago, we added a technical manager to support the sections on one hand and to support the general director on some of the other technical staffs that we have. Then we've got a communication manager and a general secretary.
Amid the current crisis, which brought with it widespread lockdown and isolation measures, how important, how necessary the remote services became?
I like your word necessary. Obviously, it's very necessary, and that became visible in security. We've seen that being used a lot because there's a lot less constraints, while in fire, a lot of the older systems, number one, can't be remotely serviced, and in many countries, only the alarm management is allowed to be done remotely, and that since years, but other services are not allowed. That's why Euralarm drafted a document some 5 years ago, which was the base of the work that we're doing now under Senelec JTC4 Working Group 1 on remote services. So for us, yes, it's necessary, but just because something is necessary doesn't mean that it's possible to do in the regulatory.
Remote services norms. Which are the challenges that you are trying to solve now?
I'd say there's two. There's an obvious one, and that is putting a regulatory framework that defines the minimum requirements for the provision of remote service. That is what we're doing in that norm. But I'd say there's a second part which is equally important, and that is it should give customers the transparency of what is being done, by whom, and when, and under what conditions, meaning secure remote access infrastructure. We also state in the document that whatever we agree on between the organizations providing the services and the client should be written down contractually, and we describe what that is. So that second goal is to give confidence that doing remote services is safe.
The next question regarding implementing common standards within the European Union, which is one of the major problems facing the industry. Where are you now in this process?
I'd say that's not so easy a question. So it really depends on the level of detail that you want to get into. If you're talking about harmonized standards, you're right. If you're talking about European standards, that's another thing. The process is still taking too long, but common standards across countries is, I would say, going fairly well. That is very important to manufacturers, because taking a European-wide approach rather than a country-by-country standard facilitates doing business. It makes it obviously simpler, cheaper, which makes it interesting also for the market. So subjects such as testing and certification for fire and security products and services, I would state that is going fairly well, and it's been going on for many years. If I take a look at harmonized standards, which have a much wider scope than just fire and security, that is much more nuanced. If I take a look at subjects such as construction product regulation, or CPR as they called it, that's a problem, because they're mixing all types of construction products, going from concrete down to our fire safety products. And that scope has made it difficult for us to be compliant. And we've been working to get that point across so that we can either be taken out, or that we can do some changes to the text to differentiate according to the type of products.
If there is anything good in this pandemic, is the exponential growth of digitalization and the implementation of digital application. How did the security industry perform in this global drive for digitalization?
I think if you take security versus safety, meaning the video access control, intrusion, I think those have done quite well in the digital services. Especially video has been very active for a lot of years. So I would state that is going quite well. When it comes to additional services that are more complex, I would state that the regulatory framework really isn't in place. So I think the business models also have been, I'll state, aren't as mature as we would like to see them. And therefore maybe the exponential, and you use the word exponential, growth has not come. There is a lot of growth in this market, and we see that going in the future. That's one of the reasons that we are working on finalizing this remote services norm, is because we do see the potential to do a lot more than corrective maintenance, such as using artificial intelligence at a much larger scale to do preemptive maintenance in the future. So we see the potential, we see the growth. Maybe if I take a look at reports that I read many years ago, already 10 years ago, they were talking about that exponential growth, which I would state did not come as fast as was expected.
Digitalization and digital applications emphasize the key role of cybersecurity in keeping data and data processes safe. Which are the reasons of concern, and which are the challenges for the security industry in this respect?
I'll state the concerns are simple, and that is one could disrupt both the fire safety or security systems. That's already occurred. We already have end customers that have been attacked, and the attack could mean that for the intrusion system or the access control system, they could block it. And so we've already seen the cyber attacks. So I'd say that part is clear. We see lives are put at threat by that, and therefore it is a very important subject for us to deal with. However, if I take a look at the challenges, obviously one of the challenges is the fact that there is, depending on the part of the market, a lot of ignorance about what it is that cybersecurity is all about and who's involved in it, who's responsible for cybersecurity. So because of that, we co-authored a brochure with COAS to explain the responsibility of the different players in the value chain of a fire or a security system. Within that, we explained that there's responsibility, obviously, at the product design. If the product design is not designed with cybersecurity in mind, then you can do whatever you want. But in reality, you've got a basic problem that is tied to the product. Then there's a design of the solution. So you've got a series of products. They may be able to be or are designed to be cybersecurity, but if the sum of the security solution is not, then you still are not able to mitigate the threat of a cybersecurity attack. Then we stated also an installer also needs to think of that design and implement it. That means simple things. Just because a camera, for example, is well set up to be able to put a password, if you don't change the factory setting passwords, then the rest is irrelevant. So the installer also has an important part in that. Or operators. Operators need to be trained on what cyber attacks threat could be touching them, such as phishing, such as any means of addressing an operator that he opens up an email which gives a cyber threat. Then for service providers, they also need to be aware that when they're doing servicing to the system, to avoid rendering it vulnerable. And we have plenty of examples already in the market where each one of those have not been aware of their responsibility. What I didn't put on here is obviously the customer themselves. They need to be aware about their own systems. They need to train their own staff if they're doing the operation.
With that in mind, last question, what lays ahead for Euralarm in particular and for the security industry in general?
Sure. There's a lot. I mean, obviously, there's our traditional subjects with their relevant norms. Those are mostly based on the products, but there are new subjects such as artificial intelligence, where the European Union or other parts of the world are trying to put some constraints to the usage of artificial intelligence. Or there's themes such as the circular economy, which we need to follow. Both of those we need to follow to ensure that we're compliant and that we can, but we want to also make sure, and part of our task within Euralarm is to see how we can make sure that we're using the new technological developments and they're not being blocked by the normative blocking points that may be there in a part of the world or even today in countries. That is also what we're seeing with cybersecurity within Europe. There's a lot of players right now a lot are claiming that they're responsible for it, and that leaves a void and a lack of clarity of what will need to be done. For us, the other thing that we see, which at least I find exciting, would be the new business models as a service, where customers pay a monthly fee rather than an installation and service. The installation and service is included in that monthly fee. And what we're looking at is what type of effect that will have on our market, our traditional market. There are things such as smart home, which you can state, okay, that's residential, that's one important part of the market, but there the changes are, there are larger solutions driven by home automation with heating controls, lighting, where they're putting video access control basically as a choice. That puts us in a very different category, and for us, we're looking to see how can we open up all of those doors, make those a clear growth potential, but also make sure that it doesn't put at threat the security levels that we would like to see in the market.